Hey there, JazzMentalists, it's Tobey here. I want to talk to you today about playing better bebop solos by using Barry Harris's added half-step rules for descending lines. But I think a lot of people misinterpret what Barry Harris was trying to accomplish by using these rules. The main point of these half-step rules for descending lines is to play chord tones on the beat. And that gets the hand used to certain positions when it's soloing so things become automatic. And that's really what you're after as a jazz pianist, making things more automatic so that you can be more creative with your solos. I'm also going to show you at the grand piano some examples of how these are used in a real tune. Also, when we get a little bit further into the video, I'm going to post a link to the sheet music that we're going to talk about today so that you can download it, archive it, study it, and use it forever. The first thing that you need to understand about these extra half-step rules is they're really based on the dominant scale. So if we're in the key of F, C7 is the dominant chord for the key of F. The dominant scale is then this. Basically has 7 notes bookend by roots. Now, some people call that a mixolydian scale, but Barry Harris calls it the dominant 7th scale. So when you play that scale descending, you'll notice that the chord tones do not fall on the beat. 1 and 2, so 2 would be an A, that's not a chord tone. And 3, it's not a chord tone. And 4, not a chord tone. So the idea is to get the chord tones to appear on the beat, and the way you do that is by adding extra half steps. Rule number 1 is if you start on the root, 3rd, 5th, or 7th of the scale, then you add an extra half step between the root and the 7th. So we're starting on 1, add a half step between the root and the 7th. This is a B natural. You're starting on the 3rd. It's the same half step, it's just in a different place. And then starting on the 5th. And then starting on the 7th. So you'll notice in these scales, in every instance, the chord tone now falls on the beat. 1 and 2, that's a chord tone. And 3, that's a chord tone. And 4, that's a chord tone. Down to 1. So that's what you do when starting on the root, 3rd, 5th, or 7th. Let's go on to rule number 2. Rule number 2 is subdivided into 2 rules. This is rule 2A. When starting on the 2nd, 4th, or 6th, you add no half steps. Just follow the scale down and everything on the beat falls on a chord tone. So for example, and then starting on the 4th, and then on the 6th. That's actually pretty simple rules because all you have to do is play the scale. Now, of course, if you start on 2, you're ending up on 1. Because now you have 8 notes that go throughout that entire scale and chord tones still fall on the beat. Now, of course, if you're swinging this, you would basically play it like this. And the beauty of that is because the chord tones fall on the beat, your hand gets used to playing chord tones where they should be played. All right, let's move on to the second part of rule 2, which I call rule 2B. If you start on 2, 4, and 6, just like the first part, you can add 2 half steps between the 2nd and the root, and between the root and the 7th. If we start on 2 and come down the scale, you're adding a half step between 2 and 1. So that would be the D flat. And just like before, add another half step between the root and the 7th. So it sounds like this. Same thing when starting on the 4th. And then starting on the 6th. Again, in every single case, the chord tones fall on the beat. Let's play it one more time. Swing. Okay, that's rule 2B. Let's move on to rule number 3, which is the last rule in these half-step descending lines. Rule number 3 says if you start on 3, 5, or 7, just like the first rule, you can add 3 half steps between the 3rd and the 7th. This doesn't work if you start on 1, but if you start on 3, it can start to work. So instead of just 2 half-step rules, you've got 3. All chromatics between the 3rd and the 7th. Starting on the 5th, and then starting on the 7th. Pretty cool, right? Let's play it swing. There are the 3 half-step rules for descending lines by Barry Harris. Now, I've turned this into an exercise. Rather than do the exercise in the key of F, we're going to do it in the key of B flat. So for B flat, F7 is the dominant chord. So you can see we started with an 8th note here at the end of this line on the and of 4 heading into the next bar. So the goal for this exercise is to play it swing. And then moving on to rule 2, where we're starting on the 2nd, the 4th, or the 6th of the scale. Okay, and then moving on to the rule 2B, which is adding 2 extra half steps when starting on the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th of the scale. Okay, and then the final rule, rule number 3, is when starting on the 3rd, 5th, or 7th, you can add 2 extra half steps. So starting on the 3rd, and that exercise is great. I would recommend that you do it in a few different keys to start. If you want to do it in all 12 keys, if you're really ambitious, go ahead and do that. Right now, I'm just going to pop over to the grand piano, give you an example of how this would sound in a real world context. We're just going to use some of these ideas over the tune Autumn Leaves in the key of B flat, which is what we've been working on in this exercise. And then when we get back, I'm going to post a link to the sheet music so that you can download it, study it, and practice it for yourself. And then I'm going to put a link to the next video, which is going to introduce to you 4 different types of arpeggios to use over the dominant 7th scale. And this is going to be really useful to be able to mix arpeggios and descending lines. And then it really starts to sound like real bebop. All right, let's pop over to the grand piano and play a little bit. All right, there's a little bit of how your bebop playing can change if you start introducing these half-step rules for descending lines. Right now, let's post a link to the sheet music that we talked about today. It's absolutely free to download. Just go to that link in the corner and you can check that out. So now that you understand the half-step rules, let's apply them using a new concept, which is basically adding arpeggios. There are 4 types of arpeggios that you can use over dominant chords, but there are other chords that you can use them over too. So that's a little bit of hint on what's coming next. Then you can mix those arpeggios with the half-step rules for descending lines and start creating some really interesting bebop lines. I'm going to put a link to that video right here.